Hey folks, happy Tuesday. I am here. This is part one of my 5-part review of She's Gotta Have It. It's the reimagining of the Spike Lee 1986 movie. Netflix decided to option a series with Spike returning as the executive producer and one of the writers. And so this vlog will review episodes 1 and 2. Episode 1 being the doctrine, the jump off, and episode 2, which is bootyful, self acceptance. So I thought maybe we can start this review by maybe talking a little bit about the original 1986 She's Gotta Have It movie, which, by the way, I highly recommend watching the movie first. It's actually on Netflix streaming. I would suggest watching that and then watching the series. And I did it a little bit in reverse, but I think watching the first movie and then watching the series will give you a lot of insight as to how Spike came about, went about in updating this version of Nola Darling. And I think for me at least, it made me appreciate the update and appreciate the original as well. So with this update, we have DeWanda Wise, who is starring as Nola Darling, the title role, and the 3 male suitors, have all returned for the update. There's Jamie Overstreet, who's played by Lyric Bent, Greer Childs, who is played by Cleo Anthony, and Mars Blackman, who was originally played by Spike Lee and is now being played by Ramos. Anthony Ramos, and you may recognize him. He was originally in the cast of Hamilton. So, what I really loved about this update, there's a lot more world building, I think, in this one. We know that Nola Darling lives in Brooklyn, in the Fort Greene area, which, of course, Spike Lee used to live there too. 40 Acres and a Mule is actually based there. And so, what I loved about this update, which we didn't really see in the original one, but in this version, we really see how Nola is a part of this community, right? Fort Greene is a very thriving community of Black artists, artists of color, white artists too. But I love that they put the focus on Nola being an artist. And throughout the series, we see how her life impacts her art and how her art impacts her life. And so it's sort of like this very intertwined relationship. And so we get to see that. So when we're reintroduced to Nola in the first episode, Spike has still kept the characters breaking the fourth wall, so to speak. So we see Nola, we see Greer, we see Jamie, we see Mars talking into the camera, as well as other characters that are part of Nola's life too. So I really feel like that was a mechanism or a device that definitely works in this series. So let's talk about DeWanda Rise, DeWanda in the role of Nola. I really loved her take on this character. I think Tracy Kamala Johns did a good job, right? And I think, particularly for a first movie like She's Gotta Have It, it was very boundary breaking in the fact that we had a depiction of this sexually liberated, polyamorous woman, right? And what's interesting, and DeWanda has said this in interviews, is that when, She's Gotta Have It came out in 1986, we didn't exactly have that kind of language and kind of knowledge that we have for the Nola of today, right? The debate in She's Gotta Have It, the movie was, was she a freak, right? Was she a nymphomaniac? Was she a sex addict, right? And so now in this 2017 adaptation, we have the language and we have the wording to describe who Nola is, right? As a person. She is polyamorous. She is someone who, is prefers to date or see more than one person at the same time. And so I think the the series does a good job of normalizing that, right? There's no sex shaming. There's no retribution for her sexual liberation. She just is who she is, right? And, from the opening montage or the opening monologue, she's very clear on that. She does not want to be seen as normal. She embraces who she is. Yes, she has three men that she's seeing at the same time, and she has no problem with that. And so I really appreciate that we have that kind of imagery and that kind of language to describe who Nola is, because particularly in film and TV, Black women's sexuality can be very narrow, right? Especially when we talk about Black respectability, right? We think about like the Claire Huxtables and, those type of Black women icons. We're supposed to be, married with kids or single and looking to be married. And a lot of us Black women, a lot of us choose not to do that. And it's no knock on women who choose to be married or not, who choose to be married. That is their choice. But it is also a choice of a Black single woman to enjoy her single status, right? And if she wants to see more than one man or women at the same time, that is her right, right? And so I really like how the series is deconstructing the double standards, right? Because let's think about it. We have quite a few male characters, right, on TV and film who are polyamorous. They may not use the word, but they're seeing more than one woman at the same time. But you know what I mean? There's no stigma attached to that. And so I like that the series is working to destigmatize polyamorous women, and specifically polyamorous Black women. So throughout the first episode, we get to see Nola interact with each of her suitors. With Jamie, what's interesting is that in this version of She's Gotta Have It, he is actually married. He's married, estranged from what he tells us. He's estranged from his wife. And in this one, Jamie is very wealthy, or he has money. We can tell that he runs his own finance company. He's involved in something, but we can tell from his clothing and from his, the way he carries himself, this is somebody who's definitely making beaucoup dollars, right? And so the relationship that I feel that Jamie and Nola have is more of a he's sort of a patron, right? Because in the first episode, it is actually Nola's birthday, and she shares her birthday with Malcolm X, who's one of her icons. And so, for her birthday, he brings her a basket of art supplies, right? Because she's a struggling artist. She's, working, living off of grants, living off of whatever artwork she sells. She walks dogs. We can see that Nola is someone who is hustling, right? And that is just a true reality for anybody single who's living in New York. Especially if you have your own apartment, which she does, you're working maybe 2 to 3, 4 different hustles just to make the rent every month. So, this is definitely not Sex in the City. There's been a lot of comparisons, or I should say there are people who have been comparing, this show to Sex in the City, or comparing Nola's character, like the unfortunate Glamour article, I should say the tweet that Glamour sent, where they compared Nola to Samantha Jones from Sex and the City, and I was like, no. I think there might be a couple of parallels, but not really. Like, Nola is not, shopping from Manolo Blahnik. She's not lunching on Fifth Avenue. She's not, taking exotic trips. This is, a woman in her 20s who, we can tell is educated, has a certain amount of privilege in the fact that, she comes from a 2-parent home. Her parents own a brownstone down the block from her. They're able to assist her a little bit here and there, when she's financially strapped. But for all intensive purposes, Nola is someone who is working to support herself. And Jamie kind of fills in the gaps, of things that she needs, like art supplies. I'm going to assume that he's probably, knocked out her rent a couple of times and probably bought her artwork to kind of keep her afloat. So they sort of have this, passionate relationship. I think they do care about each other. I think Jamie despite him being married and having his own issues with his wife, I do think that there's a level of emotional connection between him and Nola. And so we're seeing that. And then the relationship that she has with Greer Childs, right? So in this iteration of She's Gotta Have It, Greer Childs is not only a model like the what we saw in the movie. Greer is also a commercial photographer, right? So he's got two hustles going on, which would explain why he can afford the apartment that he has. So with Greer, in the first episode, I would say that the relationship that he and Nola have, it's sort of like kindred spirits, right? They're both artists, they're both impulsive, they're both passionate, and so I think that is the connection that they have. Although personally, I just find Greer unbearable sometimes. He's so vain, he's so conceited, much like the movie. In this one is like times 10, and I think the actor Cleo Anthony nails Greer. This is somebody who's very self-absorbed, who's very much about his looks, very much about how people see him. And so I think Nola kind of in her mind it's okay because from what we're understanding, they have the bomb sex, right? So obviously their sexual interactions makes up for his character shortcomings, so I guess that's why she deals with him, right? And then we get to her third suitor, who is Mars Blackman. We're introduced to him in the first episode as well, played by Anthony Ramos. And in this version of Mars Blackman, much like the movie, he is, I think he was a courier, right? Or some sort of bike deliverer. So that's still intact. But in this one, we find out that Mars is biracial. He is half black and half Latino. And I was really happy to see that because just a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation about how there's such a lack of black Latino representation on film and television. So I really like that they tweaked this update of Mars. And let me tell you, Anthony Ramos as Mars is hilarious. I thought Spike did a good job in the 1986 movie. I thought Mars was very funny and charming. But Anthony does something really interesting with Mars. Like, he's still outrageous, he's still funny, much like the original Mars. But in this one, there is a certain depth to Mars that we didn't see in the original movie. When you see his interactions with Nola, to me, it really felt like he cares about her. He cares about her as a person, in the first episode. And I just want to tell anybody, if you have not seen She's Gotta Have It, I'm going to be revealing some spoilers. So if you have not seen episode 1 and 2, this is your chance to turn it off, okay? So in episode 1, we're introduced to each of the suitors, their interactions with Nola. And at the end of episode 1, she has a blowout with Jamie where Jamie is basically asking her, where is this relationship going? What's going on? And Jamie is just in his feelings, and he's feeling salty because 2 nights ago he had spent his, Nola's birthday. He spent the night with Nola on her birthday. And then the next day, and this is actually one of my favorite scenes in episode 1, when Jamie calls her from his office the next day, Nola is with Mars, right? So there's this great cutting of the scene where you see Jamie sitting at his desk calling Nola, and the camera goes back to Nola's apartment, and she's getting her back blown out by Mars. And what was especially funny about that scene was that they played Force MD's Tender Love, right? So it kind of added humor to the scene, and it also kind of gave you some insight on who Jamie is, right? Jamie sort of has like this very romanticized vision, right? Or image of what he thinks he and Nola are, right? So he sort of feels insulted, like, well, I just spent the night with you and you didn't pick up your phone. And so the day after that, he and Nola have a blowout, an argument. I'm assuming it's because of the phone call and the fact that she didn't pick up. And so he leaves. She goes to her friend's Clorinda, her friend Clorinda. Clorinda is played by Margot Bingham, right? So in the original, She's Gotta Have It, we did have the Clorinda character who was played by Spike's sister Joie Lee, but we didn't really see her. We only saw her in the beginning of the movie where she was talking to the camera, explaining her relationship with Nola. We understand from the movie version that Clorinda used to be a roommate of Nola's, but then they had a falling out because Clorinda got tired of the traffic of the men that were coming in and out of the apartment. Basically, every morning when she went to use the bathroom, there was a different dude in there. And so, she confronted Nola, and Nola was like, well, this is my apartment. My name is on the lease. You got to bounce, right? So in the movie version, Clorinda and Nola are estranged. They don't really speak to each other until the end of the movie. But within what's cool about this update of She's Gotta Have It, Clorinda and Nola still have the same blowout, same, where Clorinda has to move out. But in this version, Clorinda and Nola are still friends. And I thought that that was a really important update because I think that's a truth about relationships between women, right? That sometimes we can argue and we may not agree with certain principles or philosophies or ideas that our friends have, but we have to overcome that and still be able to maintain that friendship, right? And so many, we've have a lot of shows that depict, or movies that depict very toxic friendships between women, right? And that women are catty and women can't be friends, right? And so I like that the series deconstructs that, where Clinda's like, you know what, I'm not really feeling how you have all these dudes coming up in the apartment. But Clorinda moves out, gets her own apartment, and still maintains the relationship with Nola. And I feel like that is more authentic to how we are as women. I mean, I have women friends, and, I have a really good, woman friend of mine. We disagree on quite a few things. I'm more liberal, she's more conservative, you know what I mean? And so we'll have discussions about, Clarence Thomas or Trump, or not that she voted for Trump, but, we'll just have we'll have different points of view. And sometimes we do clash. But sometimes, we just need a couple of days, and then, we'll text each other and be like, hey, I'm sorry. Or, hey, do you want to, you want to meet up for brunch? Let's go shopping. And I swear, the minute we meet up, it's like whatever we were arguing about, it was like, what were we arguing? What were we mad about? I don't remember. So I really feel like establishing in this update, giving Nola women friends is something that's really important. I think that is the bedrock for a lot of Black women. And I said this on Twitter a few about I think last week, where there was a Netflix movie that came out a few months ago called The Incredible Jessica James, which stars Jessica Williams, formerly of The Daily Show. And there's some DNA that's a little bit, I won't say they're exactly alike, but in Incredible Jessica James, Jessica Williams plays a burgeoning or a aspiring playwright who lives in Brooklyn. I'm assuming it's Williamsburg, right? And when I watched Incredible Jessica James, it just felt off to me because throughout the whole movie, she was basically the only Black person that you saw in this movie. Like, her best friend was not a woman of color. I think she was white. It's the actress who played on Master of None, who played Aziz Ansari's first girlfriend. And so her best friend is white. Her love interest, her new love interest in the movie is a white guy. Her ex is Lakeith Stanfield. So Lakeith was like basically the only other black person that you saw, at least an adult that you saw, but they were exes, and we never really understood why they broke up. It was some weirdness. I don't know if he cheated on her or whatever, but it was just very jarring to watch Incredible Jessica James, because I'm like, how are you a Black woman artist and you don't have any other fellow Black artists, to commune with, right? Because they sort of framed Jessica James like she was like this unicorn, like, ooh, a Black woman playwright. Where else can we find that? And I just don't find that to be true. I've lived in New York. I'm born and bred in New York, and I can trip over the number of aspiring Black artists, whether male, female, trans, whichever. So I just found that very inauthentic. I was like, how are you having a movie about a Black woman who lives in Brooklyn and she ain't got no Black friends? She doesn't have any Black girlfriends. You didn't see her brunch with any. It was just very weird to me. So watching, um, you know, the Netflix series of She's Gotta Have It, I was like, okay, this feels more authentic to me. Any Black woman, you go to Sunday brunch, go to Brooklyn, Harlem, anywhere. When Black women are brunching, you'll find 5, 6, 7, 8 women, Black women deep, okay, into bottomless mimosas or whatever it is that you drink for brunch. That is our experience. And it could be mixed too. You could have, a splash of white, a splash of Latina, a splash of Asian in there. But trust and believe, most Black women who live in New York have a network of Black female friends. That is absolutely accurate. So I am very happy that, we're introduced to Clorinda, one of her friends. Then we're also introduced to Nola's other friend, whose name is Shemeka. And that runs into the second episode, but I'll get to that. But yeah, all to say, the end of the first episode, something really bad happens to Nola. She's walking home from Clorinda's, because she's basically kind of blowing off steam after her argument with Jamie, and has drinks with Clorinda at her apartment, is walking across the street, and this dude comes up to her and basically grabs her arm and, sexually harasses her. And she's so shook by this encounter. And so that kind of runs into the second episode, where, the theme of that one is more about her friendship with Shemeka, right? We're introduced to Shemeka in the first episode. Shemeka is a friend of hers who decides she wants to enhance her body, right? So basically she wants to get butt injections, right? We understand that Shemeka is a single mother. She's working as a waitress in this sort of burlesque club, and she notices that, the women who work there, who have bigger butts, bigger boobs, are making more money, more tips. So she decides, well, if I could get some of these injections, then maybe I can make more money so I can support myself and my daughter. And so I found this episode interesting because when you talk about things like that, whether body enhancements, boob enhancements or anything like that, you kind of fall into what we call respectability politics, right? And so I was looking at this episode to see how they were going to frame the fact that Shemeka wanted to get butt injections, right? I'm like, are you guys going to shame her for this? Or are we going to have the honest conversation, right? About why some women decide to do it, right? Because the idea is that, or the myth, I'm going to say myth very loosely, is that women who decide to have any kind of enhancement on their body or plastic surgery, they're doing it because they feel they have low self-esteem. They're insecure. And so that's what they're doing. And so what I liked about this episode is that, at least for me, the way that I processed Shemeka wanting to get these butt injections is that this was clearly a financial imperative for her, right? I think there was a mix of two things. There was some insecurity because she was joking how, she's Jamaican, but she doesn't have a bubble butt. She doesn't have a big butt. But really, to me, it did seem that Shemeka wanted these enhancement pure, or I would say more, because she wants to make more money. It's not a vanity. I don't think it was totally a vanity thing for Shemeka. So, she and Nola have a discussion. Nola is sort of like, well, you're a beautiful woman. You don't need to have these butt injections. I don't know why you want to do this to your body. And Shemeka kind of pushes back. And I think the pushback was important, right? Because if Nola just sat there and just preached at her as like, oh, you need to love yourself, that would just be a really boring episode and a really boring scene. But I love the fact that Shemeka stood up for herself, where she was like, well, you don't know what it's like, right? And what's interesting between Nola and Shemeka is not only was there the conversation about body image, but you could also see the difference in class, right, between Shemeka and Nola. Nola is college educated. She's gone to Pratt again. Comes from a two-parent home. You know what I mean? The apartment that she's living in. The reason why she can afford it is because the landlord is her godmother, and she's friends with her family. So she's paying a third of the rent that most Fort Greene residents are, right? So Nola does have a certain amount of privilege, and Shemeka is someone that we understand is someone who's working hard, right? We're not really sure how much her baby daddy is, contributing, to the livelihood or, the things that she has to pay for. But it was interesting to see how Nola and Shemeka navigate this friendship, right? Because while I said earlier that, all Black women, or most Black women have a sisterhood or a network of Black women friends, that being said, we're not a monolith. A lot of us are very different from each other. Like I said, my friend earlier, she's more conservative. She has her master's. She's working on her PhD. She's like this tech genius, okay? She could probably hack into the Pentagon if she had enough time and some coffee. And I'm someone who's just like still trying to figure out how to use my phone. You know what I mean? Like we're very, very different in a lot of ways, but there are enough things that connect us as friends where we maintain the friendship, right? And so I think you will see that in any friendship between Black women. There's always differences, whether religion, class, education, ability, sexual preference. We're not a monolith. There's a spectrum of Black womanhood. So I was really fascinated in how they were able to explore this in episode 2. So yeah, I think the first 2 episodes were promising. And I would highly suggest, like I said, if you have not watched it yet, watch the movie first, watch She's Gotta Have It first, and then you can watch and then you can watch the series, and you'll really be interested. It'll be really interesting to see how Spike has changed it. And I think the other thing too, lastly, and I think I forgot to say this, this series of She's Gotta Have It, what was really exciting for me was that, because we've been criticizing the fact that, over the years, Spike has not always been the best writer of women or Black women in his movies, and there was some ashiness and hotepness going on there. But what I love about this series is that he's employed lots of Black women to work on this series. His wife, Tanya Lewis Lee, is one of the executive producers. Rada Blank, who's a very famous Black writer, is also a writer and producer. Joie Lee, his sister, wrote an episode. I think it was episode 7. So basically the writer's room is also run by Elizabeth Hunter, who is a Black woman and producer. And how about Lynn Nottage, who is like an esteemed Black woman playwright? Remember what I said before? Yes, Black woman playwright, is also one of the producers of She's Gotta Have It. So I love the fact that we have Black women behind the camera that are writing and shaping, Nola Darling. And I think when you watch the show, you will see that. The first episode is written by Spike, but as the episodes progress, the more Black women write the episodes, and you can definitely see the difference in the tone and how Nola moves about the world. So I really am happy to see that. So yeah, that's my recap of episode 1 and 2 of She's Gotta Have It. I will be posting this on my Patreon. Once you watch it, feel free to comment under the video. We can have a discussion. We can talk about it. And tomorrow I will be posting my recap of episode 3 and 4 because some stuff happens. So yeah, have a good evening. Bye.